Welcome back, Fire fans. Today we have the privilege of introducing a remarkable guest. He is a seasoned pararescue veteran who served at the 301st Aerospace Rescue and Recovery Squadron in Homestead Air Force Base, Florida, for 4 years. Additionally, he had an illustrious 24-year career with the CIA, where he actively engaged in combating Marxists, communists, drug cartels, jihad extremists, terrorists across the globe, and even a volcano. Whether he realizes it or not, he is a national hero and a true embodiment of the American spirit. We at the I Came with Fire podcast proudly present Enrique A. Rick Prado and strongly recommend his book, Black Ops: The Life of a CIA Shadow Operator. So thank you, Mr. Prado, for being here. We're really excited to have you here. How do you feel about being on the podcast?
Awesome, guys. I really appreciate the opportunity.
We
Sweet,
appreciate
sweet.
it.
Yeah, no, it's when you responded back saying, "Yeah, let's go," we were both we were kind of like two schoolgirls, very excited about it. So
I think that's
Yeah.
pretty accurate. No, I
yeah,
loved your book very much. Pulled me in literally right away. The way you talked about your childhood and all of that. Yeah, I was pulled in immediately.
Thank you. Thank you.
well, before
Of
we
course.
kind of get too far into it, Gresham, would you like to kind of tell people where they can maybe get recaffeinated?
Absolutely. So I Came with Fire podcast is proudly sponsored by Red Clover Coffee. Red Clover Coffee is veteran owned. If you enter our Came with Fire discount code at checkout, you can get 10% off your order. I got it right here. I got their peanut Burt with the A10 on the package. I recommend this one. Their Blueberry Invasion, it's awesome. Like I said, they're veteran owned. They donate to a lot of awesome charities. You can find the link to them on our Instagram page, or you can Google Red Clover Coffee. So we appreciate it, Red Clover, and go get some coffee.
Cool. Are you much of a coffee drinker, Rick?
Absolutely. I'm a borderline coffee snob.
Coffee
Yeah,
snob?
Yeah. I am all about good coffee. Espresso is my go-to, but when I have American coffee, it also has to be good. Yeah.
Okay. What's your favorite American coffee you kind of do? Like, what kind of brand do you mostly use?
I have my wife bought me an espresso machine that does all. It does
that's
single
awesome.
shots, double shots, and it makes the best American coffee. I usually have, in the winter, that's what I drink. It'll be, the fuller cup. And during the summer down here, the espresso gives me the kick without, all the heat.
Yeah,
Oh, for
But
sure.
yeah. No, that makes sense. Gresham, obviously, he drinks a lot of coffee too. Um,
I do.
I'm not so much. I'm more of an energy drink type guy. I think it's just kind of how I
um,
grew up. Yeah.
yeah,
Drink a lot of Red Bulls and Monsters and Bangs. So
I tried Red Bull once.
you
Oh
tried it
Uh,
yeah,
once?
yeah, I thought I was drinking, what do you call it, radiator fluid.
they do have a
That's what it
specific
smells like.
taste. Yeah, it's true.
Yeah.
Sweet man.
Well, cool. Gresham, yeah, I think we'll go in order here. You actually have the first question, so if you kind of want to hit it out of the
Absolutely.
park, we can kind of go from there.
Cool. So, obviously, in the book, you outline really well how the ideology of communism pits hardworking success stories against those who choose to see their personal failures as the failure of the state to take care of them. I think you outline that really well, just kind of the stories that you're telling at the beginning of the book. The confiscation of your family's business obviously is extremely terrible. But what would you say to those today who idealize communism and its figureheads like Che and Castro?
Go live there. Let's start with that. I respect anybody's ideology. You want to be a communist? I have no problem with that. Live in a communist country. You show me one communist country that has improved, benefited from communism, and I'll laugh you. From Russia to Poland to Venezuela, Cuba, Nicaragua, the list is endless of people that have dabbled with this stuff, which starts with socialism. That's
Right.
the scary part here. And what I try to explain to people is socialism is nothing more than a mask that communists wear to lure you into their lair and then eat
Hmm.
your food. So for me, like I said, I respect everybody's opinion, right, left, middle, whatever you want to be, but don't be a communist in the United States, just like you wouldn't be able to be a pro-American democratic guy in the Soviet Union or, God forbid, Cuba.
That's a good point. I had a teacher growing up who used to say that communism was just socialism with guns.
That's
And
it.
yeah,
Well,
absolutely. I agree with that.
less guns with the people, more guns with the government.
There you go.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, no, obviously I joined the Air Force at like 18 right out of high school. And then my first base was in Japan, and it was my first time outside the United States. And, Japan's a first world country and everything, so I was like, oh, it's pretty nice, all type of stuff. But a couple of years in, I deployed to Oman, and when I got to Oman, I was like, wow, like people live like this. This is like a culture shock. And then a couple years in, I actually went down to South America. I was deployed to Curacao, which is a little island off the coast of Venezuela next to Aruba. Um, you say you've been there, Eric
I,
or Rick?
I, I've been to Venezuela. I have not been to Curacao.
Okay, yeah,
Yeah, I
Curaçao's pretty.
know.
Yeah, Curaçao's pretty nice. And what I was doing there is we were obviously working with the Southern Command and what was it, Border Patrol and stuff to just make sure to keep drugs out of the United States coming from like South America and stuff. So that was my main like job. But going there and then eventually also deploying to the Horn of Africa with Brandon, you kind of start to see how lucky we are to be an American, to be in the United States, to have all our rights. The poorest people in America are richer than like most of the world. So it's pretty
That's true.
interesting, especially when I was in Curacao, you would have people who were proud of the way their dirt looked because that's all they had to be proud of. They would sweep their dirt every morning in the front of their like house to make it look pretty. And then you had people in Kenya who were like super excited about just very small kind of things because that's what they were excited and proud about. It just blows my mind when you have American citizens who will complain about the smallest, most ridiculous things when they don't really realize how good they have it.
Absolutely. Look, the biggest problem we have in the United States is we do not know how good we have it.
Hmm.
The average American, when he or she travels overseas, even if you're doing business, you could go to a crap hole somewhere. You're going to stay in the best hotels. You're going to eat the food that is not going to give you Montezuma's revenge. You're not going to see the poverty and the criminalization of some areas, like in Africa. I've done a little time in both East and West Africa. Um, People do not understand this. I had a lady once ask me, she says, well, I mean, this conversation, she says, well, I've been to Mexico. And I took a wild guess. I said, no, ma'am, you were in a cruise to Cancun. And she went,
Right.
I said, big difference. And even when you go to a third world country, most Americans, even if they go to a third world country on business, they stay in a nice hotel. They're there for a week or 2 weeks. They don't have to put up with the lines for food, or corrupt cops stopping you everywhere, to get you to pay a fine because you were speeding or whatever it is. So yeah, we do not know how good we have it. And if I was king for a day, you could not graduate from high school unless you did 30 days in some shithole in a third world country.
That's
Because
not a bad idea.
you will come back, no iPad, no iPhone. You'll come back and you would be so grateful of every first world problem that you have that it would be better.
I think one of the best things about being in the military and then seeing it happen to other members of the military is when you get to see the world and you understand that a lot of the problems that we think we have in the United States, we're allowed to have these first world problems because we have such a society that supports us so much. We are able to go to a grocery store, we're able to go buy a new phone or go to a movie theater or whatever. And a lot of the problems in our country today 100% are first world problems. And if you go to a country where you can't afford food or you can't go to the grocery store and get food, a lot of these other problems would 100% disappear because you can't and you don't have time to deal with first world problems. You got to worry about where your next meal is coming from or whatever.
Absolutely. 100%.
Yeah, I was making dinner for my wife and I today, and it was like some potatoes in a special like seasoning, and we had it in the oven. And I open up the oven, and obviously a little heat wave comes out, and it hits the little like fire alarm sensor, and it starts going off. And I was immediately irritated, right? Like, oh great, this is going off. But like that's something so small that irritates me. That's just an example of like all these things that we have, and like I'm mad at the fire alarm potentially going to notify first responders to come help me when just in other places they got to figure it out. Like there's no one to come help them or anything like that. So yeah, it just kind of
Good way to
goes
look
what
at
you're
it.
saying.
A lot of
Yeah.
countries there that have no idea what 911 is.
Mm-hmm.
Very true.
Yeah. Or if there was a 911, they'd be too afraid that the cop would be corrupt and not help them anyways. Take
Exactly.
advantage of them in their bad situation.
Happens all the time. Happens
Hmm.
all the
In your book, Rick, so I'm a gun enthusiast. I love firearms, all that type of stuff. And in your book, it seemed like every time you would like start a mission in the book, you'd kind of give us your loadout. You'd always say, "I got my 1911 and 45," stuff like that. But there was a certain gun. It was the Lady Smith revolver. You always said you had it down at your ankle. It was like your secondary gun or your backup gun. But the way you would explain it in your book, it was almost like you had like a love attachment
Oh
to
yeah.
it, or that you had like it was like your mistress or something. So I was just curious, do you still have the coveted Lady Smith revolver? And if you do, and if it is something special, what was special about it? What made you just always explain in the book that it was like your mistress?
Well, it was unfortunately it got stolen out of my household goods when I came back from the Philippines. Uh,
Ah.
yeah, that along with a whole bunch of other stuff. But the thing with the Ladysmith was just the practicality. I also carried in the earlier days. I used to carry a Walther PPK in my ankle,
Hmm.
as my sidearm and all the other crap with that I would have on. I always believe in having a hidden backup weapon.
Hmm.
In my world, if you get picked up, most third world countries, if you get in trouble, they don't know how to pat you down. They don't know, you may get away with something, a crotch gun but in the Philippines, because of the heat and the humidity, regular weapons really suffer. So this was a stainless steel Lady Smith, 5 shots. And as a matter of fact, there's a little vignette in the book where I was. This is when after the first Gulf War, we were chasing the Iraqis that were quite prominent there in the Philippines, and actually they tried to bomb one of our facilities. But when I would meet volunteers or people that I wanted to try to approach about finding out more about the Iraqis, I would send them to the local five-star hotel. They had two or three that were high end. They all had metal detectors. No, actually, they had one. They would wand you. That's what it was. They
Hmm.
would, and I noticed that they never wand you below your knees. So I would go, clean from the waist up, but I would have two 38s, one in each ankle with two strips of 5 rounds in case I need a reload. I was pretty confident I was one of the few guys in that place that had a gun. So because
That's awesome.
whoever I was meeting is going to get searched just the same. So yeah, yeah.
That sucks that you lost that firearm. That really sucks. I would be upset if I lost one of my firearms during household goods or whatever.
Well,
Um,
especially when you have a historical attachment to it, because that was, like I said, that was my, that's if you're pulling that ankle piece, you're in a world of poop. You know?
Right.
yeah, yeah. Did you
Well,
ever did you ever need to use your secondary firearm or pull it out?
No, I never did. I have pulled my primary weapon a couple of times, but
Yeah,
really I haven't gotten into that thing that where something malfunctions or you could run out of your ammo and you have to start digging for your backup gun. But I'm a firm believer in it.
nice, nice. You had something you wanted to say, Brandon?
no, I was just gonna say that in your line of work, if you have to pull your pistol on somebody, then you're taking a lot into your hands, and not just your life. You could be compromising yourself in your position. You could be giving away whatever you're working on. There's a lot that goes into that. So knowing you have that pistol at your side and what it means to pull it, it's of course you have a strong attachment to it.
Yeah, and you hit it right on the spot. But a lot of people, and that was the reason I wrote the book. The reason I wrote the book was because There's such fantasy, negative fantasy about what the
Hmm.
CIA is all about, and most importantly, how it demeans my colleagues, all who are great American patriots. You
Right.
know, so it just irks me to see that prospect out there being thrown out. So, but for me, the getting to the attachment of things because they are part of who you are. Um, it's a very natural thing. I'm not a gun guy in the sense of collecting guns. To me, they're tools, but I have one
Sure.
of each niche weapon that I need. As a matter of fact, I just ordered a Beretta 300 shotgun.
Classic.
Uh, because that is hot, that's hot stuff. So yeah.
Yeah, I recently got a lever action, a Model X big boy Henry rifle. So it's all
Nice.
like black and sleek. And then I had to take it and I made it I modernized it so it's got like M-lock rails and a whole bunch of stuff. So it's like a modern lever action. I'm like a futuristic cowboy. So it's kind of cool.
That
That
is
is
that
cool.
is real. But my dad was a cowboy, and I have dozens of pictures of being like 1, 2, 3, 5 years old dressed as a cowboy. So that's very dear to me. I love horses. I own a little cabin in Georgia, and what I have there is I have a replica late 1800s Winchester kind of weapon
Oh
in
wow.
Hmm.
Colt, and below it there's a single action, revolver, and they're all loaded and they all work. So
Oh
they're more
wow.
than just yeah. Oh hell yeah! There isn't a single unloaded gun in my house.
Makes
Smart.
sense. Yeah.
My kids shoot better than I do. So what the hell?
There you go. That's awesome.
do they uh do they do they shoot better than you because maybe might be losing your edge a little bit with age, or is it just you just taught them too well?
Actually, they can't.
Oh, they can't.
Not with handguns. My
Yeah.
my both my boys are former military or military. One is active duty Army Special
Okay.
Mhm.
Forces. The other one is did 6 years in the Air Force, and he became a doctor in physical therapy, and he's now working at the VA. So they started
Awesome.
shooting when they were 7 years old, martial arts when they were 5. Um, but when it comes to the handgun, I still got an edge on them. But especially my Army guy with a long gun, he's pretty damn good.
That's
So you
nice.
bring
My
up, and I know you talked before about martial arts and doing that growing up. There's so many lessons about martial arts that you can take out and apply to regular life. Some of those lessons they have a lot to do with like mental and then physical toughness. What would you say is something that you've taken out of martial arts and maybe inserted into your when you were employed by the CIA? Something maybe like the mental toughness factor that you get from martial arts.
You know, I really think that God puts us on this earth for a mission, but
I agree.
He also prepares you for it. My childhood, you alluded to my childhood. That's not a typical childhood. I got to witness violence and communism before I was 10 years old. So as you progress in your life with age, it really makes a difference for what you want to do. So for me, with the martial arts, I started in a style called Kyokushin, which is a
Hmm.
very, very hard Japanese. By the way, I studied Japanese for 14 months, so I don't know if you picked up any while you were over there, but
my
it
my
was
wife's actually Japanese, so
oh,
You
I
picked up at
so,
least
she
one.
yeah,
oh,
I got at least one word down.
it was a time when I had a 2 level in Japanese, believe it or not, but
Wow.
never had to serve there long term. But back to the martial arts thing, you learn not only how to do violence, but how to avoid having to do violence. Because when you keep your ego in check, it is completely different. It helped me in the agency because, like you very smartly stated, the minute in my agency that you do this, your mission is compromised.
Right.
You're done. Even if nobody sees you, even if you get away with it, your mission is done. And that's the best case scenario.
Hmm.
So it's that confidence that, look, I can take care of myself. I don't have to confront somebody just because they're giving me dirty looks because I know I can kick their ass. So why even bother?
Right.
It's like I'm more of a pain in the ass if I'm with my wife or something like that. I'm by myself, but you could call me whatever the hell you want. I'll just keep walking. You put a hand on me, that's a different story. So I think that whole, started early, with the inculcation of, my dad brought me up. Like I said, my dad was a cowboy. So that cowboy ethos for him is you guys have to be tough. You have to defend your family. You have to keep your cool and and so on. And then the martial arts reinforced that. I was blessed that my first two martial arts instructors were both police officers. They were both combat Marines. One was
Wow.
Leo Thalassides, was a World War II Pacific Marine, and the other one, Jim Alfano, who was very dear to me. He was my first real sensei. Jim was a Vietnam era Force Recon
Wow.
guy, and yeah, Raider or whatever they called them back then. And they were both extremely good, but they were also extremely, strict with us. I would tell you, I've been in the martial arts since I was 15. The toughest test I ever had was when I went for my green belt at the age of 16. 3 days, he about killed me. But
Man.
when you come out of that, that's part of that forging of the metal that got me through other things, including, pararescue. I actually thought I was pretty tough kid. I was in pretty good shape. I could lift a lot of weights and, I could fight. I got the pararescue, man. I got in that pipeline and I was humbled. For the first few weeks, I was puking every day and, you conquer that too. So yeah, it's all part of the melding or the forging of your metal as you go along.
I think that's cool that you're saying that basically it gave you a sense of confidence and self assurance in yourself so that you know you don't have to react. It's kind of helping you temper your ego, like you said. And when you talked about what the pararescue pipeline did to you immediately, it makes me think of somebody else we've had on the podcast who's a pararescueman as well. And he said the same thing, that you get there and you think you're tough shit, and then, you show up and they humble you really quick. And
Hmm.
so that's I've never heard somebody not say that before that has been through that. So
There's again a vignette in the book that really typifies that. I'm not known for taking crap from people. So, but we had a terrorist safe house that we had bugged, and in order to get the sound correct, I had to do what's called a path loss test. I had to walk around the block where that safe house was, which was a real shit neighborhood, with this device that I'm pumping out a signal, and the techs are up there and in the observation post and listening post, tweaking what frequencies we're going to program this crap from. And I hadn't bathed in 2 days. I hadn't shaved. I had a little vest on, had my Browning on the side, and I had a buddy of mine about a block behind me with a shotgun. And as I walked by the front door of this safe house, which we knew it belonged to a lady, but the terrorists would come in, the local terrorists would come in and say, "Get the hell out! We're going to have a meeting," and then we
okay.
just hang out at her place. So I'm walking right in front of their door. The door opens. Five of these guys walk out. They got a soccer ball in their hand, and they bump into me.
Oh,
And they start shoving me around. They start giving me a ration of shit. My first instinct was, there's five of them. I got 15 rounds in this thing. You're done.
three for
But then
each
I
of you.
thought, what's more important? Getting the mission done. So I did
Right.
the, I'm sorry, I'm sorry, don't hurt me kind of thing and walked off. And when I finished, I felt really proud because 3 or 4 months later, we busted all their asses and threw them in jail.
Right.
So payback's a
Awesome.
bit,
Hell
yeah.
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 That had to be
Yeah. So
really
you,
intense.
Do
yeah.
what?
So you kept your cool there and everything. In your book, there was that one incident when you were training, um, and you were in. I think you were sitting in the back seat. It was a training exercise, and you had your friend in the front seat, and he had like the window cracked, and he was like, "Contact left," and then you all just got out and annihilated everyone. And then like later on, the trainer was like, "I was just asking if you had like money or something," and in the book you were like, I was so upset, and you're kind of going back to when to draw the gun, when to not draw the gun. So
That's a
technically that
and,
mission was compromised. So
yeah, exactly. And the
yeah.
thing was, and I'm a firm believer in consequences. When I'm very fair, I always say please and thank you. But the ethos in any team that I ever formed was when you screw up, you stand up. We sit there within, you may get your ass shoot out or you might be given some guidance. Then you grab a beer and you clink and you do better the next time. So absolutely, that one incident is a very good example of that. Yeah.
Mhm. Yeah. So we talked a little bit. You said how when you were going to become a PJ, it humbled you real quick and stuff. I know you were a PJ to reserve unit, and it was only for about 4 years after you complete all your training. So you barely touched on your time as a PJ in your book. I know the book is also mostly focused on humanizing the CIA for the American public, but was there any fondest memories of while you were a PJ or kind of unique stuff that you really enjoyed about it? And I was just kind of any worthwhile stories you want to tell us?
Absolutely. I'm a humble pararescueman. I earned my beret, but I had very few rescue missions or anything like that. I did a total of 8 years in the reserves. The last four with the 20th Special Forces up in Fort Lauderdale, a C
Okay.
company. I never went through the Q course because the agency recruited me before my turn came up to go to the course. But
Hmm.
for me, pararescue, and I say this at every chance that I get, and I'll say it now, I would have not gotten into CIA if it hadn't been for pararescue, because I started in the agency as a combat medic. I applied, and when they saw my background and the fact that I had been writing rescue in Miami in the '70s for 6 years, they went like, "This guy knows his shit." So they brought me over, interviewed me. I showed them what I could do, and I was working contract. I would come in for for different periods, and that's how the agency, when the Contra program started, when Reagan took over and decided to declare war on communism, they said, "Remember that Cuban kid, the PJ, blah blah blah." There'd never been a PJ in CIA to begin with,
Oh wow.
and I'm very proud of that. I'm the guest speaker at a reunion this year in September, and that is exactly what I want to highlight: the fact that, as humble as my roots are in pararescue, I've honored them throughout the agency, and from you guys have read the book, the mission that we did in Puerto Cabezas, and then the rescue that I pulled off in Corinto, that
Hmm.
rescue was textbook PJ shit.
I was
Yeah.
thinking that the whole time reading that.
Helo passed out of a helicopter out of over 30 feet because the pilots wouldn't go any lower,
Right.
um, to get your guys out, and bring them out. That was textbook. I could have been I could have been an 18 Delta. I could have been anything else, and I probably would not have had the tools that I had to do my low and slow casting and going in there and doing all my shit. So yeah.
It just goes back exactly to what you said about God gives you a purpose and then puts you in the position to fulfill that purpose, because without that training, you and that rescue and that was mission, I would love to hear you talk more about that mission. I mean, what you did rescuing those guys that were kind of stranded out there in the reeds and all of that. But you were the right and the only person for that job. And so it just goes back to exactly what you said.
I'm a firm believer in that. A lot of people say, "How do you keep your cool under this stuff?" First of all, you got to believe. You got to believe that what you're doing is really important. But that particular mission for me was so meaningful for several reasons. First of all, I fought communism in five different incarnations. This was my first, and very special to me because it's the same monster that destroyed my first country, and here I am now, cutting off some of those tentacles from that damn thing. But the first thing that was very important to me is these were my guys. I trained
Right.
them. They were lobster divers. I trained them to be, combat divers. I trained them how to blow shit up. I trained them in this. There's no way. When I went to the base chief, Leon, who's a super good guy, we're friends to this day, I went up to him and say, "Hey, chief, I'm not letting my guys out there." I wasn't asking him for permission to go get them. So I'm not letting my guys out there.
Hmm.
So the two boats that went to do a mission, and everything went belly up there, they were coming out. Unfortunately, the boats were very fast, but also very unreliable, and they tended to foul up and everything else. So one got conked out right after coming out of Corinto, and it was in the mangroves. The other one made it to the center of Gulf of Fonseca, still in Nicaraguan waters, and they were just like a bobbing cork out there. And so I went to my guy, and he said, "So what are you going to do?" I said, "Well, here's what we're going to do. Just get me some rope. So I made stable rigs, which is what you hang out of a helicopter. I'm not describing it for you guys because I know you know where it is, but for your audience, they're actually straps that come out of a helicopter with a seat, and you can come in, put people on there, and you take off. So
Hmm.
field expedient, four, five actually stable rigs. Then I had fuel, I had water, I had tools, spark plugs, and everything else. And I also had two sticks of C4 fully ready, strapped to my chest with plastic so it wouldn't get wet. And
Oh man.
I, cast it out of the helicopter. And our thing's supposed to be 15 feet, 15 knots. These pilots were not water pilots. They were great pilots, but they were not water pilots. They were not. When they told me get the hell out, I kept going like this, and they said get the hell out. I
No.
said I got it. It was a very long drop, but
Man.
it was classic pararescue. Luckily, we were able to restart the boat, and we brought it back with the guys, got them fixed. I was on my by then probably 36 hours with no sleep. And we went right back out to get the second boat, and Sandinistas, they had figured out something was going on there. We had an aircraft on the in the ground. They knew a helicopter had come into their AO, so they were waiting for us, and they tried to find us. But we were able to circumvent that too.
That's amazing. Genuinely, yeah, you were 100% of the right person for that job at the right time. And
Blessed.
definitely. Uh, so growing up, I had, your book isn't the first time I've heard about the Sandinistas and what happened, in South America with a lot of the Marxist regimes moving in. But one thing that has always been for certain is just the violence and the terrible carnage that they wreaked on people. You know what I mean? So you getting to see that firsthand, what is something specifically that you can remember or recall, situation maybe that you had firsthand in stopping something like that?
Well, the exposure. Like I said, I was probably 7 or 8 years old when the Castro was revolution, for lack of a better word, was going on. And literally at the age of 7 or 8, I saw people get shot. I saw a guy fire an automatic weapon 2 feet in front of my face because I was standing by the window like an idiot trying to see
Right.
what was going on. Didn't notice there was this guy with an automatic weapon below me. So I saw
Hmm.
that violence. But the violence that really registered was maybe a year or so later when we decided to move to Havana to get out. As soon as we drove into the city, there were three guys hanging from trees with signs around their necks that said counter-revolutionaries. My dad's business was confiscated. So, I came out of this to this country by myself. My parents couldn't get out, and I ended up in an orphanage in Pueblo, Colorado. And again, you talk about stealing your metal. You're I mean, Pueblo's a blue collar town now. Imagine back in 1962, right?
Yeah.
The only place you could go was rodeos, and I love rodeos, so I was a happy camper. But it's just that was another stealing of the metal kind of thing. But I think that to the point of fighting communism, of course, I was chief of the Koreas. I've worked against the Koreans, and I've worked against everybody else too, Chinese, everybody else. But the first one was that Contra program, because for me, those individuals on the ground were the people that I would have liked to have been old enough to try to do it in Cuba. You know,
Right.
I lived in the camps. I was in the Honduran border with Nicaragua for 3 years. And the first 14 months of that mission, I was the only CIA officer allowed to go into the camps because I was
Wow.
there as a Honduran major, and I could play the part of a local. I was Hispanic. I knew the language, and that's why the book is called Black Ops. This was a very successful black op where the U.S. hand has to be hidden. A lot of people do not understand that. This is why when you compromise something, it's not an op anymore. It's a screw up.
Right.
So, I trained these guys. I slept in a jungle hammock Monday through Friday for 3 years. And I never woke up in the morning not wanting to be there or anything else. I loved it because after training all day at night, I would grab a cup of coffee and I'd go to different fireplace because they would have the little fireplaces going in different places. And I would sit down and ask them, I said, why are you here?
Hmm.
What's driving you to, eat this muck and get eaten by mosquitoes and leishmaniasis and everything is snakes, you name it, that was out there. And not to mention Sandinistas, which were, we were pretty much in the same neighborhood. And
Yeah.
every single one of the people that I asked that had a story. Every single one of them. None had read Marx or Lenin, or some even didn't know who Castro was. But they all had a story. They raped my daughter. They burned down my church. They beat up my priest. Now they stole they conscripted my 15-year-old son, and he got killed. So every single one of these individuals, men and women, because there were several women, quite a few women in the camps, their purpose was so pure. There was no fluff in anything. To them, they were willing to die. They were willing to live under those conditions. Mud and infested with every bug out in the jungles out there, for the hope that they could give their parents, their sons and daughters, some kind of freedom in the future. It doesn't get any more noble than that, as far as I'm concerned.
For sure.
Couldn't agree more. It's something that you guys immediately have that camaraderie right off the bat. The fact that you guys are all there, it's from the heart. You're not somebody who's, working or out there for money. You're not somebody who doesn't believe in it's being forced. You guys have that automatic, brotherhood, that shared relation there, that camaraderie, like I said. That's pretty amazing, and I feel like is pretty unique too, that you guys had that together. It must have been something that could keep you going while you're out there in such horrid conditions.
Yeah, like I said, I never complain about my conditions. First of all, I'll eat whatever is out there to eat, and
Right.
and I did pay the price. I got medevac once. I had giardia, dysentery, amoeba, all in one place.
Damn.
But yeah, well, you're eating out of banana leaves out there in the Mesquite. They would serve the food in the banana leaves, and it actually
Right.
makes sense because the plates are not going to be as clean as that banana leaf, right? So that
Sure.
but it was. I mean, the motivation was always there, and I will tell you, if I had to name one thing that really lifted my spirits, was when we blew up Puerto Cabezas, when we were able to put that kind of a black eye on the Sandinistas. And when I saw the overhead, for the first time ever seeing satellite overhead a couple of days later at the base of the big ass hole that we put in that thing, I'm going like,
Hell yeah.
there you go. Paybacks are a bitch, because 1962, you put a hole in my family, so now I'm going to put a hole in you. So,
Yeah. That's got to be so motivating. Like seeing that, like we did that. That was us. That's
Dude,
awesome.
Yeah. What a
Yeah.
unique feeling.
I think also you're talking about how you went from fireplace to fireplace and you spoke with them. I think that's just because you obviously throughout your career you rose to very high positions. Eventually becoming the chief of counterterrorism and all that type of stuff. But very early on, you were exhibiting like great leadership qualities. A great leader will go around and ask their people, why are they there? What are they doing? So. Like Brandon has been saying, you were definitely the right person at the right time, and I think you were the people that they needed at that time to be able to fight and rise up for their causes, because they saw what a great leader and how invested you were with them.
yeah, it's funny. You used the word hero earlier on, and I really appreciate that. I take it as a compliment. But you got to understand, guys. Guys like me, we grew up in the shadow of giants. Okay? When I went into Pararescue, my main instructor at the end was a guy named Wayne Fisk. You can Google him.
Yep.
Chief Master Sergeant Wayne Fisk. 3 Silver Stars, Mayagüez, Sante Raid, 4 tours and as a matter of fact, I was just 10 days ago or so, I was at SOCOM, where he got presented with the Bull Simons Award.
Wow.
Big to do, So when you have somebody, and to this day he's one of my best friends, but when you have that kind of individual, it keeps you humble and it keeps you centered. Dewey Claridge, one of my best friends, which unfortunately we lost a few months back, was Waugh. Billy Waugh was a legendary Green Beret, Mag V SOG, parachuted behind enemy lines, cut people's throats. I mean, he'd done it all. Jump nuclear backpacks in Area 51 for practice. And
Wow.
they the agency, and he captures the jackal, and he makes book on Osama bin Laden, and he was a dear friend of mine.
Yeah.
So when you have those kind of people as your role models, you learn a lot. You learn their style. You learn that even they never. I never have heard Wayne Fisk or Billy say, I was hot shit. I did everything that anybody could. None of them. If you went to Wayne's, because he's the one that's still alive, if you went into Wayne's door tomorrow and you knocked on and you go, "We need you," he would cowboy up and he'd be right there for you because we do not feel that we've done enough. You can never do enough good because there's too much evil out there.
Yeah. And
Wow.
you definitely saw a lot of it, so you definitely have the broader picture of how much evil actually exists out there. So that that's a powerful sentence message coming straight from you.
Well, and you're being very humble, right? Of course, like you said, but I mean, I truly wish there were more people in the world like you and like people like Wayne Fisk, because there aren't enough people doing good all the time who feel as if they haven't done enough for good.
Yeah, the sad thing is like going back to we don't know how good we have it. We also don't know, what the prices that are paid for the freedoms that we enjoy. So
It's
yeah,
true.
absolutely. When you have guys like Wayne Fisk being your mentor or Billy Waugh being your mentor, they ground you. They really ground you to the realities of the sacrifices that you have to continue to be making. One of the things that I said at Wayne's ceremony, because I was one of two speakers on his behalf. The other one was legendary PJ Ray Colon Lopez. And one of the things that I mentioned is you got to understand that at any given time, 2% of the population in the United States serves in the military.
Hmm.
2%. There's another 2% that become law enforcement, and I respect the hell out of them. I work a lot with cops. But 2% join the military. Out of that 2%, 1% makes it to SOF, Special Operations Forces. And then even in Special Operations Forces, there's only one Billy Waugh and there's only one Wayne Fisk. There's a lot of guys out there that are great. The only thing that I would put in contrast for you, though, guys, is that I taught at Fort Bragg. It was Advanced Special Operations and Tactics course. I can't tell you what it was because it's classified, but it was a lot of fun. I did that for 7 years.
No worries.
And for me was the pay sucked. And living in Fayetteville is not exactly, I live near the beach and I have a cabin in the mountains. Why the hell would I be in Fayetteville, right? But it was the students and it was the instructors. I worked with instructors that had 4, 5, 6 tours, combat tours. They had bullet holes in them, and they raised beautiful families, God loving, going to church. They bring the kids to work, for picnics and all that other stuff. And they would get called. They would come in the office like a kid at Christmas. Hey, I'm deploying to Syria tomorrow. This is great, man. I'm going back. And you sit there and you go, wow, wow.
Yeah.
Uh, the reason I kept doing that was because I've never had a civilian job in my life after high school. I went into Pararescue, from there to Metro Rescue. I was still in the reserves when I got into the agency. Then the
Hmm.
agency, Blackwater, I was doing the same crap, but just for better money. But it's just at the end of the day, you look back and you go, "Wow, what a great amount of opportunities!" And I'm just very proud about the only thing that I would tell you that I will take credit for is that I never had hesitation of paying the price of admission. I went into a mission with, my wife, my kids they would come out of my mind the minute I got in that car because
Right.
everything it had to be blocked out. And I think that the bottom line for that is you have to believe in what you're doing. If you don't believe in what you're doing, risk becomes very, very, very tentative. But
Right.
if you believe what you're doing, you're gonna do take the full measure. So
Yeah.
I,
You brought up Chief Colon Lopez. He was actually my command chief when I was at Kadena Air Base. So this is like 10 years ago. And so I was a newer senior airman and I was a PTL. So I conduct the PT tests and stuff. And I'm sitting there. It's early in the morning, and we're checking people in. And in comes the command chief, Chief Master Sergeant Colon Lopez, here for his annual PT test, right? And so he goes in and he signs in, and he's like, I'm going to partner with you. And I was like, Roger that, Chief. So we're sitting there, and we're partners and stuff, and we're about to do sit-ups. And he looks at me and he goes, "Make sure you count the right ones." And I was like, Roger that, Chief. And so he's going to his sit-ups, and he was like intentionally doing them wrong. It was a test. He wanted to see if I would call him out on if he's doing it right or not. And so, I was like, "Sir, you didn't go all the way down." And he was like, "Oh, okay, like this." And I was like, "Sir, you didn't go all the way down. It's still like 2." And then finally, he was like, "I like that." And then he just knocked out like 80 of them in a minute because he's chilly Colon Lopez.
Yeah.
And then he did the same thing with push-ups. And I was like, "Sir, you're not breaking 90." And he's like, "Oh, so like this." And then he knocked out like 80 of those as well. And then it was time for the run. He comes over to me and he's all like, "You ready for the run, Smith?" And I was like, "Chief, yeah, I'll run, but I don't think I could keep up with you." And he's like, "Oh, well, just try." And so we're running, and I made like half a lap with him, and then he was gone. And I couldn't keep up, and it humbled me. I'm like a 20-year-old young man who is relatively fit and stuff. And I don't know what his age was, but he's a chief at the time, so he's got to be late 30s, early 40s at this time.
Yeah.
And he smoked everyone. He ran like a mile and a half in like 8:50 and got his 100 on his PT test. And but he coined me afterwards. He gave me a coin. He said, "I appreciate how you didn't let my rank or my position get in the way of you being a good airman." He was like, "You still kept the rules and regulations in mind. You didn't let me get away with just skating by, not doing the right thing." I was like, "Oh, thanks, Chief." And it's funny because he's all about carnivore leadership and his silver bullets, and his coin, it looks like a Jurassic Park like T-Rex, and it says like carnivore leader on it, and on the back it says like Chief Colon Lopez. It's in my office, so I don't have it here, but it was a really nice moment. And then he was in charge of the Horn of Africa. He was the chief of the Horn of Africa when Brandon and I were there. We didn't see him or anything, but it's just he's still trucking along, just doing great things. So
Yeah, he still is. He's going to be retiring soon. As a matter of fact, at the Pararescue reunion, he's the guest speaker for the rodeo, and I'm the guest speaker for the event. And it'll be nice hanging out with him. Wayne is going to make it up there, he promised. So it is. But there's very few people that can say that they're Ray Colon Lopez's guys, but there's several others. There's a young PJ. He just retired, by the name of Ivan Ruiz.
Okay.
And Ivan, you're talking Air Force Cross kind of mission, right?
yeah.
So I went to his, well, first he got inducted into the Jolly Green Hall of Fame as the first time that the Jolly Green Association gave the award to a single person. It had always been to a team. It had always been to helos and this kind of crap. And he had done a mission solo that merited that. So for that mission, they first put him in for a Silver Star. Then the Secretary of the Air Force, she said, "No, this deserves better." So now we're going to his, Air Force Cross, and it was really a great ceremony. I go back to brag about a month later, and I always started when I introduced myself, I always start out with, I was a Pararescue NCO, and then I went to this, and then I went to that, and this Green Beret captain comes up to me at the end when we were in the halls, and he says, "Hey, sir, I'm not blowing smoke up your ass, but I will tell you the best warrior I've ever worked with was a PJ." And I don't know why I said, "Are you talking about Ivan Ruiz?" He went, "Yeah." I said, "Yeah, I was just at his ceremony." He was on the ground. He was a part of they were targeting HVT, high value target house. And he was the PJ, the token PJ in the group. And they got hit coming right in. They got cleaned up. And two guys went down right in front of him. He pulled them out of harm's way under fire, patched them up while shooting. And then when the rest of the team came up, he went in the house with them and he killed like 6 guys. And this
Holy
this
shit.
this guy was there. He says, I know who Ivan Ruiz is. I know that I'm here. Many of us are here because a guy like Ivan Ruiz. So all that stuff keeps you humble, man. I mean, it really
For
has to.
sure. Yeah, it really does.
Truly walking in the shadows of giants. Absolutely.
Um, so we'll kind of shift gears here a little bit. Um, you left Cuba, right? Very young. Came to the
Peter
United
Pan
States.
program.
Stuff. Yep. Peter Pan program. All that. All that. Have you ever gone back? Have you ever gone back to Cuba as like a tourist to like visit your hometown to kind of see what it looks like today? I know like the U.S. a couple years ago, we started kind of like somewhat trading with them again, and then you know relationships are okay today. But have you ever gone back and kind of seen it?
Well, you're thinking like an American,
I
okay?
am. I am.
Like an American, there's somebody that could come to the United States and they could be a diehard communist and nobody's going to mess with them. Can you imagine if I set foot in Cuba? They know who I am. Even before the book, they knew who I was. I've worked
Yeah.
every day
That's a
and
good
served as
point.
a senior officer. And imagine the propaganda that they could milk. Former Cuban national CIA spy caught dealing drugs. Put an ounce of coke in my suitcase. I'm screwed for 20 years in Cuba.
Yep.
So do I want to go? Absolutely. My wife is also Cuban born, and there's nothing that I would love more than to take our 3 kids and even grandkids and show them where we lived, where our grandparents were, what our beaches were like, what our mountains were like. But until there's a full change of government there's no way that I could risk not only me but my family. It's not going to happen. It's not even viable. Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow.
That's unfortunate because that was your home. That's where you grew up and stuff. So
Yeah, I'm
yeah,
I'm a,
that's
I'm
kind
an
of sad to
American. I'm
hear.
an American 100%, but I'd never forget
Hmm.
my roots because that's where I was born.
Yeah, for sure. Let's see here. So when we talked earlier about how you said you drew your firearms before. In the book, you talk about a point where you were walking. There was a group coming up, and it was the people who could do the quick draw really fast, and they could shoot very quickly and then get out of there. You obviously drew your firearm for that, and you just kind of held them at gunpoint while still walking up and everything. Um, with that experience and the stare down, with a hit squad set up to whack you and your guys, could you tell us more about that? Can maybe go in a little more detail? Like, what was you said you had like tunnel vision and stuff, but do you remember more details about that you maybe didn't put in the book or?
Yeah, I don't know. It's one of those things where comes in, and discipline comes in. There's a lot of people that I got a lot of training, but they don't have the discipline to maintain and own up to the inconvenience of doing things the right way. And it
Hmm.
was some of us in that had gone. We were working with the Filipinos, and this was an MPA, New People's Army. Assassins were called Sparrows, and they were killing the crap out of our Americans at Subic and especially at Clark Air Force Base. And these guys, they would carry a 45 1911 A1 in their crotch, no holster. They would hold it up with their left hand, and what they would do is they would pop the gun up, shoot you, put it away, and walk. And everybody looks at, gee, this guy just got shot. Then when they look around, these guys were gone. They were ghosts.
Hmm.
So one had been captured, and they actually, you can Google that. It actually have it out there where you can Google it, and they shows the guy that made a deal so he could demonstrate the kind of stuff that they do. So we went, long day, was end of the week, and we went to have a couple of beers and a sandwich before retiring. And we walk out of the place, and the first 2 guys that come out were Filipino green, special forces from their army. 2 captains, hard as woodpecker lips. They didn't see anything. 2 of our techs who have training came out, same thing. They were still thinking about the dancing girl and the beer. And I walked out last, and my buddy Davis, was right in front of me. A good friend of mine, fortunately, I lost him last year. But all of a sudden, I see three guys, and they're in a huddle like this, and they're talking. And as soon as I walk out, we walk out. They make one guy made eye contact. The other, and the three of them get side by side. They start walking right in front of us. The guys on the outside both had their hands in their left pocket, and they're staring you down. So I drew my weapon. Now, this is when you're talking about tunnel vision. When that
Mm-hmm.
bolus of adrenaline kicks, I couldn't hear shit. You know, Davis might have been going like, "Holy shit!" What? I never heard a thing. All I could see was these three guys. Now, if I walk out of a restaurant and you're just walking around and I do this and I put a gun on you, your reaction is going to be like, "Whoa, wait, man, what's going on here? What did I do?" Kind of shit. These guys didn't even blink. So I drew my weapon. I'm watching them. I'm making eye contact. I'm looking at them hard. And the guy in the middle just looks and goes like, "I'll get you next time." And I'm going like, "No, you ain't."
Yeah.
Literally walk
You're
right
paying
past.
attention.
Well, but the moral of the story here, guys, and your gun guys, is I don't give a shit if you're quick draw McGraw. If you're reacting to a gun, you are already in a world of crap. So
True.
awareness, I honestly believe that if Davis and I had not noticed this, you and I would not be talking. When I know
For sure.
Davis was a Vietnam vet, infantry, decorated guy. So he was a tough dude. And when I finally, lowered my weapon, breathed and looked around, and your vision starts to open up a little bit. Davis was trying to light a cigarette, and his hand was like this, not from fear, but
Yeah,
just the
adrenaline.
adrenaline. And he looks
He
at me
was
and
on the
goes,
juice.
"Yeah, oh yeah." He was like, his eyes were a bunch. So he looks at me and says, "You saw that, right?" I said, I pull out my gun too. He said, "Oh, I didn't see you." Because again, he had the same thing, tunnel vision and everything else. Needless to say, my guys, I couldn't chew out the Filipinos because it's their country, but my guys
Mm-hmm.
got thoroughly, heels locked there because if we'd been around differently, we probably wouldn't have made it. You got three guys that can shoot and six guys that got their hands in their pockets. It's easy picking. You know.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So these sparrows, are these the same group of people that are responsible for the assassination of James Rowe?
Well, Nick Rowe. Nick was
Nick Rowe.
yeah, Nick Rowe was a colonel, Green Beret, legendary, escaped prison by killing a guard, walked out of Vietnam, kind of shit. The guy's incredible. Was incredible. He got assassinated by the MPA probably about 6 or 8 months before I got there. And so when we were in the Philippines, the MPA was in the city. He was killed
Right.
right in Manila, car ambush. The old Golden BB story. The car was armored. The
Hmm.
driver didn't know what he was doing, so he hit the brake when a car cut him off, and guys hop out and start shooting at in the car. And there was a seam in the back between the windows. One single bullet entered that vehicle and hit him in the back of the head. So
Jeez.
were they assassins? Absolutely. Were they sparrows? I don't know. But that was the ambiance there at the time, and shortly after that they killed and this was the Sparrows up in at Clark Air Force Base. Two airmen that were out, waiting for a taxi or something in Angeles City. And all of a sudden, somebody comes behind them and go pop, pop, and they walk off. And here's two dead guys, and everybody's looking like, what the hell happened? So they were very lethal, but they were also running around with impunity. So we helped the Filipinos quite a bit. And I tell you, I love working with those guys. They were extremely dedicated and loyal to the cause. Yeah.
I think that's something that a lot of people that come into the Air Force specifically, right? I've grown up in the Air Force. My dad is retired Air Force, but there's such a heavy Filipino presence in the Air Force and in the military in general. And
And the
people,
name,
I've heard them say like they're like that's so strange, and I'm like, well, it's really not that strange when you take into account, there used to be Clark Air Force Base before Mount Pinatubo blew it up, and just the heavy involvement the United States and the Philippines have had together for such a long time. It's not a surprise, but it catches people, off guard just how much of a presence the Filipinos and how much they have given to the United States military overall. Filipino
Well,
people.
they're grateful people, and they know that during World War II, we took care of we took good care of them. As a matter of fact, my first boss in the agency, Colonel Ray, I jumped into corregidor at the age of 17 or 18. And then he was Green
Jeez.
Beret. He went, yeah, I mean, again, another giant that
Giant.
I had to live
Yeah.
under his shadow. And he was a GS-15 when I met him, and he had been our guy in Laos. I mean, just incredible kind of thing. So the Filipinos are grateful for them, and they recognize what we brought to the table. And they're fighting people. It's like the Thais. I mean, they're the nicest, most hospitable people until it's time to kick your ass, and then you're going to get an ass whooping because they are
Right.
very good at what they do.
Right.
So, yep.
That's awesome. I'd
It's
like
funny.
to go ahead, Zach.
Oh, I was saying it's funny. I was gonna kind of transition into. I lost my train of thought, and I apologize. But I was gonna transition
Yeah, I have
into.
an excuse for that. I'm 72 years old. I mean, so come on.
uh, Long work week. I'll use that as an excuse. But you probably had way longer ones. But everyone's a little different. With the Philippines, Brandon saying that the Filipino people were like very, proud people, and they given a lot to the United States, and they joined like the service and like that. A lot of Americans today are kind of falling for kind of what you call the romance of like Marxism, of like communism, of socialism and stuff. Um, do you think that that is like something that needs to be, I guess, squashed or gone rid of? And how do you feel about like current generations and younger generations kind of being more into like socialism and communism, having seen it destroy your country? Are you worried that it could destroy the United States? Because there's the famous quote of Abe Lincoln that the United States like won't lose from the outside; it'll lose and die from within. Is this the within cancer that could potentially end it all?
Yeah, it does keep me up at night sometimes. But there's a saying that hard times make hard men make good times make soft men.
Hmm.
This romance with socialism. Again, I don't understand. We're an we're a nation that knows how to read and write. I don't know how educated we are as far as getting behind just the headlines of something and
Valid
reading the
point.
whole story and seeing it in the last paragraph says, by the way, this is all bullshit because whatever, right? Uh,
Hmm.
so it's yeah. For me, I mentioned it earlier. I don't have a problem with you being a socialist or a communist. Go somewhere else where that's the case, and if you like it there, stay there. Congratulations. My wife got People magazine, and it had a picture of Jane Fonda on the front. So I immediately took a magic marker, put a bullseye and a bullet hole in her forehead. I didn't say anything to my wife. She comes over to have breakfast. She goes, "What the heck?" And I said, "You can't forget the treason that this woman committed against us,
Hanoi Jane.
Hanoi Jane." And,
Hmm.
to me, that mentality. Now, it's very easy to be a communist when you have a chauffeur driving your Mercedes and you're having lobster and champagne for dinner. Of course, you can be a communist. This stuff is
Yep.
great. Everybody should be enjoying my lobster. Just don't come and take mine. You
Hmm.
know, so
Well,
it goes back to, again, we don't understand the freedoms that we have in this country, and most importantly, for guys like us collectively, the price of admission that we have paid to try to keep it that way. So I'm a firm believer in service. I've said this for years. Again, if I was king for a day, you would have to have some service. And it doesn't, you don't have to be a GI Joe. You don't have to be ninja. You could be, there's only two or three professions that don't exist in the military. Investment banking, prostitutes, I don't know. There's only a couple out there, professions, right?
right.
If you want to be an HR person, you want to be a
I'll take that.
policeman,
Yep.
you want to be a firefighter, you want to be a paramedic, you want to be a fighter pilot, you want to be a PJ, you want to be a Green Beret, you want to be a doctor, lawyer, Indian chief. All that exists in the services in the four branches. And if people had to do 2 years of service, just like Israel is a perfect example. And then you
Yeah.
go into the wars, but you do 2 years active duty so you understand, because when you're surrounded with those kind of people, your eyes open up, your heart opens up, your brain opens up, and you
Couldn't agree more.
see firsthand the sacrifices that people have to make for you to go to that ice cream place, eat something, and not get blown up.
Yeah. Yeah, I like when you said before that it's really easy to be a communist when you've got a chauffeur, right, driving you around. It always cracks me up, and you see the people talking about communism and how great it is, and they think that they're just going to be knitting sweater mugs during the revolution, and they're not going to get signed up to go work in the salt mine, like you don't need everybody else. And it's just like they have this notion that communism is just this, oh, we're going to get together and kumbaya and we're going to all write poetry and hold hands later. It's like that is not it at all. And if your ideas have to be forced at the end of a gun, they're probably not good ideas.
Yeah.
Sure, that is true. Spot on. Spot
Yeah.
on.
They also like to say, "Oh, that wasn't true communism. That was like a different version of it. If we did true communism, it would be great." But
The
capitalism
classic
ruined
line.
it, or
We'll
someone
do it
else.
this
Yeah.
time. That's the
Yeah.
line that I keep hearing. Well, we're
Yeah.
going to do it right this time. Are you kidding me?
Yep.
Since 1917, you've been trying this stuff and it doesn't work.
Yeah.
Time and time again, unless, and the other phrase that I love using is to say, yeah, communism makes everybody equally miserable, except for the leadership who are, it's funny because I look at the one of the Spanish TVs. I don't watch TV, but I read all my news on the computer. And there's this network in Miami called America TV, and they cover a lot of the stuff that's going on in Cuba. And it's amazing to see, the stuff that's going on, the crimes that are being committed, the desperation of people. The we need to secure our borders, not to keep us in the country. It's
Yeah.
people. I have yet to see a Miami in person build a raft, a makeshift raft, and put a weed
the other way.
eater back as a propeller and go to Cuba.
Yeah.
And if you do that, I will tell you what, I will salute you. If you want to be a communist and you build one of those barges and you spend 6 days out at sea like my uncle did and almost died, and you make it to Cuba, you deserve to be decorated and you deserve to become a communist.
I think it's funny, some of the people that would sit here and say how terrible of a country the United States is, but then they champion people coming across the border illegally because they're going to have so much of a better life. It's like, how much more counterintuitive can your ideology be when you're trying to convince me that our country is terrible, but then you're championing these people for walking across the border and seeking asylum? You know what I mean? It doesn't, the whole thing, it just doesn't make any sense, this ideology that these people hold.
And the immigration issue doesn't make any sense. As I said from the very beginning, I am an immigrant. I came to this country legally, but I came to this country as an immigrant looking for freedom, not for financial stuff. We were middle class in Cuba. But, it amazes me to see the naivete of people when it comes to the border situation. Okay. I'm not a dumb guy, but I like
Definitely
bringing
not.
things down to the micro. Okay. And here's what the example that I tell people. I say, okay, so you have a nice house in a nice neighborhood, and somebody moves down the street in not so nice side of the neighborhood,
Right.
and they knock on your door one day and they say, hey, can you give me a cup of sugar, or can you help me out, or something like that? Well, you know who that person is. You find out who that person is, and you decide to help that person. That's good. But if you break into my house in the back and take over my back bathroom and bedroom and pop a kid, he's not a Prado, and I'm going to
No.
shoot you. So how is that different than not controlling our borders? We need immigration in this country badly. We really do.
We
We
do.
need,
Yes.
and we need legal. We need to know who is coming into your house. Come on, when you guys, when you tell your wife, hey, yeah, get somebody to paint the house, what's the first thing that they have to do? To find out who this individual, what are the
They vet that
credentials?
person.
You
Yep.
vet that person. You know, so it's exactly the same thing. So the problem with immigration is twofold. The most imminent problem, of course, is controlling the borders and allowing in. I would not put a quota. Bring in as many people as can come in legally. Well, even if the numbers are the same, at least they're legal. We know who they are. We know what they're coming here to do. They've caught Chinese, they've caught Iranians, they've caught all kinds of crap coming through that border that they have
Fentanyl.
no. The fentanyl phenomena is just off the
Hmm.
chart.
Yeah.
So, but the second part of the problem is that we need to streamline our immigration procedures so we can bring in the people that we need in a very quick time. For the average Latin American or for average anything out there to get into the United States, it takes several years of paperwork. And, some of them don't have the money to do that kind of stuff. So we need to fix both things, did him out. I mean, we have to fix the immigration clearance process so it could be expedited. Not everybody's going to be a doctor, lawyer, Indian chief. We got plenty of those in the United States. We need the people that are coming here to do like my father did, manual labor, and climb up the ranks and become an American. So those two things, they don't happen in a vacuum. They both have to be fixed.
You're right, and you
Yeah,
hit the
for
nail
sure.
on the head because immigration is one of the big is literally one of the biggest reasons why this country is as great as it is. The melting pot that we call ourselves with all these different thoughts, perspectives, different skills and abilities that people have brought in over centuries into our country is why we're so great. And some of these processes you talked about streamlining immigration. We have visas. I think it's the H-1B visa, which is a visa for people coming in on academic scholarships. And then incentivizing those people staying here in the United States as well as the other half of that. Because if you have somebody come in and they do all this work and they graduate and they're in the tech industry or whatever, you want them to stay, and help make this country even better than it already is. And you're right, not everybody is that person who, is going to write the next great computer software or whatever. You need people who want to come here, who want to be a part of society and be productive. And it doesn't matter what that looks like. As long as you want to come here and be productive, I'm all for that. Like you said, there's no cap on that. I want to see your work ethic. I want to see you contribute to your society, and that's okay, and that's good enough for me.
Hmm.
And it's funny because my wife says this all the time because she's the one that handles all the stuff in the household. And she says, why don't people become plumbers or electricians? There's kids
Yeah.
that go to college, get 4-year degree in underwater basket weaving, amount $70,000 worth of debt. Then they come out and they go, oh, can't get a job.
Yeah.
Well,
Wonder why.
guess what?
Well,
That guy that fixed our plumbing showed up for 10 minutes. It was $120.
yeah.
So come on, you can make
Well,
a very good living doing something. Yeah.
you can, and the problem is that we tell kids at a young age that you see that guy who's a plumber and you don't want to be like him because you see him doing manual labor. When in fact these trade jobs we need, right? And you think
And they're
these
looking.
lights on and the internet service we have, like all of those things, the working plumbing in your house, that doesn't just happen magically. There's people that maintain those things, and we got to
Hmm.
stop, like almost demonizing these trade jobs, and then get kids to understand at a young age that those are very honorable positions. You can flush your toilet, you can thank a plumber, like
Yep, absolutely.
absolutely.
It's a
I think
reality.
It
Yeah.
is
I think a
one
big
of
issue though with like ideologies about like immigration and a bunch of other stuff is that a lot of Americans or just a lot of people in general, they make the decisions based off of does it make me feel good, not does it actually do good.
mhm.
So they're thinking like, oh, I we should just let them all in because that's the good thing to do. And your house analogy, your house metaphor, works into it. I saw a video a couple weeks ago where it was like a rally for like immigration and like let everyone in, all this type of stuff. And there was a guy going around with like a clipboard, and he was like, "Hey, we're part of this organization. You're saying let everyone in. Well, we're looking for people to house them for a couple like weeks or months. Would you be willing to do that?" And
No,
not one from that entire rally that was saying let them all in was like, "No, well that's my house. Like I don't want them there. Like they got to go somewhere else." So like they don't actually want to do good. They just want to feel good about what they're a part. They don't realize that things have further consequences or that it's a domino effect of like future issues. They're just like, well, I'm part of the good feeling squad, so I'm great today. And I think that's something that needs to be like rectified or fixed.
Well, when you look at the fentanyl issue, when you look at the infiltration of people into this country that are not regular immigrants either, I'm
Hmm.
not, the greater majority of the people trying to come across that border are people that are desperate to provide for their family. I
Right.
get it. I fully understand that. And that's why I say we need to have a program in place that expedites that legally. They can come in, they can request, they can come in, get vetted, boom, and get to work, get a work permit, pay taxes, do all this kind of stuff.
Right.
But when you get into it, into the point that you were making is exactly so. It's just like the communist idea. It is so easy to say, oh, let them all in. But when they start coming in through your gated community and putting tents outside, you're going to be pissed off.
Hmm.
And you blame the police for not taking care of things, or you're going to, you voted it into your situation. You voted into your situation. So again, that's part of the ignorance that we have. We're such a well-read country with so many resources for information, yet we're actually very ignorant to the realities of the world. And the realities of the world are really, really simple, guys. Evil exists. You look at the enemies that we have, the Russians, the Chinese, the Persians, the Iranians,
Hmm.
they are all predators.
Hmm.
The Chinese been an imperial power since before Christ.
Yeah.
The Russians are made up of Vikings and Cossacks. All right.
Yeah.
And the Persians were the conquering, power of the world for hundreds of years.
Right.
So they see us as food. They really do. They know we have a mighty military. We know that coming into the United States and fighting in our ground is just going to get you shot because we have a lot of people here that will fight, whether they're in
Amen.
service or not. And so they know that, but at the same time, it doesn't matter. It doesn't really matter at the end of the day if you're so naive that you're willing to keep people coming in, no matter what the consequences, through that border, in spite of the fact, and it never makes the news. They caught a Chinese guy not too long ago.
Yeah.
They've caught Canadians coming through. They've caught, people with records of being terrorists in all their organizations,
Yeah.
narco traffickers, and then of course the drug and all that other things that accompanies that. That is, I saw the statistics. It's in the hundreds of thousands of kids that are dying every year from this fentanyl crap.
Hmm.
Just
It
mind
is.
blowing that you don't. It's like somebody's trying to pump poison into your house, and you're sitting there going like, okay, well, I'll open the window. I mean, it blows my mind. It blows my
It,
mind.
it's crazy too because we can identify where it's coming from as far as like in the grand scheme. You know what I mean? We know where these people are learning how to make it from. We know it's coming up from into the southern border up into our country, and you would think that this motivation that it would give you motivation to do something about it. And it seems like to me, at least sometimes, that people don't want to do anything about it because they enjoy creating chaos because it gives them the opportunity to do things behind closed doors.
Yeah, and again, we have it so good that people don't really worry about it. Yeah, yeah, oh yeah, that's terrible. It's going on down there. We need to help them. But let me go get a yogurt over here at Starbucks and pay $17 for a cup of coffee and play on my computer, and it just, wow, you have a rough life. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, very
So
difficult.
you, as Zach, and obviously you in your book, you dedicated to CIA agents and against the negative perceptions that people may have against the CIA, and you're considering just kind of how the political spectrum is in our country and how political parties have tried to manipulate intelligence agencies and criminal justice agencies for political gain. What would you tell somebody trying to go into the CIA today? What advice would you give them, considering that?
Well, let's kind of go backwards a little bit here. The first thing that the agencies and the military have to be is apolitical.
Agreed.
First thing that they taught me when I went for my master's in espionage at the farm was we do not do policies, we do not do politics. We collect intelligence one way or the other, and we do black ops, covert action. That's what the agency does on the behest of the President of the United States. That's our boss. So whether at least when I was in the agency, you were not allowed to have a political sticker on your car, right or left. You couldn't, because if you're far right or far left, and I am the opposite, and I'm your boss. That's not fair to you. That you make feel. So the first thing is putting the horse in front of the cart for a change. Is we need to understand that we were designed to be apolitical. The strength of the U.S. military is that it is apolitical. No matter what the internal beliefs are, you may be right, left, middle, whatever the hell it is, I don't care. But the military, as far as it is a monolithic. Whoever our boss is, that's who we're going to serve, whether we voted for him or her, and whether we liked them or not. So, that part of the equation to me is just as important as everything else. Understanding that the agency has to remain apolitical. Now, the reason I wrote the book is because, after 9/11, we got 139 stars on our wall. Okay, and almost a third of that is post 9/11. Some of those guys and gals I knew personally. Okay. And for me, it really, when I retired and had time for a little introspection, as you know, the lives we live is all, you're doing 110 miles an hour. You're seeing everything, but you don't have time to be introspective about it. When you look at how fast things move and how we look back and start realizing, if we could have done this, if we should have done that, why did this happen? So the agency, for me, when during introspection, I realized that it's immoral for the children and grandchildren of my colleagues to know about the agency through Jason Bourne, American Made, and all that crap that Hollywood puts out there, vis-a-vis the agency and everything else. I will tell you, I'm not saying we haven't had traitors. I'm not saying we have not had people that have done illegal things. We're part of any organization is made up of humans. Yep. It's going to have the black sheep, but it is an organization of people that are so dedicated and morally committed to the cause that I just cannot continue to hear their names and their reputations being maligned the way they are. I have a little vignette in the book that is one of my best examples of the ethos of the average, if there's such a thing, person in the agency. Well, when 9/11 happened, that night, I was going back into my office. I slept in my office for 3 days after 9/11. I'm going back to my office, and the deputy of the Hezbollah branch was a lady, and Christy, and she was 7 or 8 months pregnant. She was at her computer at 7 o'clock at night. Now, you got to understand, people don't realize this. After the attack, all federal buildings were evacuated.
Yeah.
They thought that fourth plane was going to be coming into the agency. Because think about it.
Right.
You hit the economics, you hit the military, you hit the intel. That's right. That's how they take them out.
Reasonable.
So the agency was evacuated, except for the Counter-Terrorism Center, which the majority of the guys and gals stayed. So I walk up to Christy and I go, "What are you doing here? 7 o'clock at night." She goes, "Yeah, well, she starts shaking her finger at me. She goes, "Boss, before 9/11, before today, Hezbollah had killed more Americans than anybody else." So I said, "Yeah, you're right. You're absolutely right." I said, "But let me tell you something. I have delivered 2 kids in my life, and none of them were mine. I ain't about to do a third. So you're going to got my logistics guy to take her ass home."
Yeah.
Well, fast forward a few years, every time she would see me, she said, "Every time my daughter has a birthday, I think of you, and what the hell was I thinking?" What's the moral of that story? What is the single biggest drive in humanity? It's the mother instinct. Don't mess with a bear with cubs.
Mm-hmm.
And here you are, 8 months pregnant, in a building that could have a bullseye on it, And when she
Working.
realized, eventually when she realized, she literally said, I can't believe that I did that. That's dedication.
Hmm.
When you can override the maternal instinct to get the mission done, come on, guys, doesn't get any more solid than that. And this is not a Rambo ground branch, ass kicking somebody. This is a very refined young lady who speaks a couple of languages, and she was willing to sacrifice herself and her baby unconsciously to get to the bottom of the threat.
I love hearing stuff like that about people, especially around centric to 9/11, because I was a kid when that happened. My dad was stationed at Yokota Air Base. I was in ninth grade, and for days afterwards, my dad, he was intel, retired intel, all source analyst, but he wasn't doing that job all the time because they had him doing augmentee duties for security or whatever afterwards, because obviously being overseas, security postures changed and all that stuff. But the one thing and obviously you were living it, you were working it, you were jobbing it during that time. But the one thing I have always taken away from that, and listening to my dad and the people he worked with who were active duty at the time, is that sense of duty that they had, and then the sense of community that it created. On September 12th, right? It has stuck with me my whole life. And so to hear you talk about that and hear the story, to me, you could not have humanized the CIA and the people that work to protect the rest of us in our country more in that story. I think that was like the perfect summary of that, because like you said, she didn't even think about herself. She didn't think about her baby that she was carrying. All she thought about was needing to do her job and take care of our country, this beautiful United States. And I love hearing stuff like that, and that's more inspirational to me than just about anything.
9/11, of course, was like a game changer for all of us. And there's
Hmm.
there's things that still, I can't get it out of my brain. But we had two ground branch guys who had left and had
Hmm.
huge jobs with Coca-Cola. These guys were head of security at this plant. Where they were making six figures, and they came back on 9/13
Hmm.
and said, "We'll start as a GS-12, GS-13. We don't give a shit. We just want to be here."
Sign us up.
There were several of those. I had one guy who became Hank Crumpton's deputy. Hank Crumpton was my predecessor. I was chief of ops at the
Hmm.
Counter-Terrorism Center when 9/11 happened. He was the guy before me. And
Okay.
so when we started the war, because let's face it, the agency's boots on the ground, the first boots on the ground weren't my Green Beret buddies. He was
Yeah.
my guy. We had our guys on the team. They are vectoring our special forces in. And I had this guy walk in. I never met him before. And he says, look, I know you're busy, but these are my retirement papers. You give me a job, I'll tear my papers right now. I said, what's your name? Let me have your paperwork. Yeah, come back in an hour. So I G2 the guy. The guy was a stud. He'd been the chief of station somewhere, former Navy, a military guy. And he came back and said, you're hired. You're going to be the deputy to Hank Crumpton. You're going to be leading the war against our guys on the ground. And there were
It's
just
amazing.
dozens of stories like that of people that, and there's like everything else in life, there's always some levity. We
Hmm.
actually had a local dentist in Langley who came to the gate
Wow.
and to speak to somebody in the counterterrorist side. And so God knows who they send out there to talk to the guy, probably security guy more than anything else. And
Probably.
the guy, all he wanted to say was, I said, listen, I know how to induce pain. If you guys need
Wow.
anybody for interrogations, I'm your
Let me
man.
know.
I'm working free because we got to get to the bottom of this. So it's humorous and morbid at the same time. But
Yeah.
I'll take that guy in a firefight anytime because he was
Hell yeah.
willing that line for paying back what they did to us. So
Hmm.
there's
That's just
it was a
awesome.
terrible time that also had some incredible stories, like some of the we've barely touched on. There's hundreds. At Fort Bragg, there were so many guys that told me, says, "Yeah, I joined right after 9/11. Yep, I
Hmm.
joined right after 9/11. Yep, I joined right after 9/11."
Yeah.
And all they see is 20 years of war.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm a recruiter now for the Air Force. It's all about like gotta make goal. And I have flight chiefs who were new recruiters during like 9/11 or like some senior pro soups and stuff today. And I asked them questions about it, and they said on 9/10/2001, they were barely making goal, couldn't get anyone through the door, no one wanted to join. 9/11 happened, and then on 9/12, they had lines. Like people knew it was coming, they were ready. America was ready, and it just goes to show that on 9/10, there was Republicans, there was Democrats, there was all these division and all that type of stuff, usually throughout the United States. 9/11 happened on 9/12. It was just Americans. Didn't
I love
matter
that.
who you were or what you were. On 9/12, we were all Americans and we were ready to fight, and ready to go and ready to come together. And we did. And it lasted a while. I would say it was probably till about like the mid 2010s before the division started to kind of like creep up and really, really take hold again. But yeah, no, at the end of the
Yeah,
day, when push comes to shove, we're all Americans.
yeah. The sad thing though is that the calcium in the backbone starts to melt as time goes really quickly.
Mm,
Right.
And unfortunately, we become so politicized nationwide. And look, there's a real basic rule in both military ops and in intelligence ops. You cannot run operations through a political optic. Okay,
No.
you cannot you cannot fight a war judging by your morality because your enemy has none of that.
yep.
So yeah, it's really disturbing to me to see the again, how good we have it that we don't realize that you have to fight for it. You have to fight for it. We when I don't do politics. I don't talk about politics in any podcast, but I
Mm,
do like history. And I try to tell people, I say, look, when Jimmy Carter took over as president, now Jimmy Carter was a gentleman, a brilliant guy, a veteran, a God-loving individual, none corrupt. He was also very naive, and he was also came across as food. What happened during his 4 years?
The Iran
Russia,
Contra.
Afghanistan. The Iranians take our hostages for 444 days. We lose the Panama Canal. We give away the Panama Canal. On this day, is still the most strategic point in this hemisphere for military operations. Why? Because they saw him as food. What happened when Reagan took over? The day
I
he went in, the
yeah.
next day the hostages were released.
Yep.
All 444 days. They did not go 445 because he came into power on the 444th. And that just goes on and on and on. He declared war on communism in Latin America. And it stopped. I mean, Nicaragua, if we had not stopped Nicaragua, Salvador was already falling, Honduras was already under attack. It would have been the whole thing would have gone, and it's getting there in a different way through politics and everything else. But yeah, it is a very frustrating thing to see the minute number of Americans that walk the walk.
I
And
think.
that's why on Veterans Day and Memorial Day, I always include our law enforcement and first responders because a lot of people are now saying, hey, thank you for your service, and we all appreciate that. But I don't know how many lunches I've paid for without them even knowing because there were a couple of soldiers there, and I would write Air One on the ticket and pay for it or whatever. But there's a big difference between that and actually stepping up and doing something about it. And again, not everybody has to be a GI Joe, but everybody needs to contribute to this country. This is a team sport, and we are under threat. We do have enemies out there that are not going to let up. They're
No.
not going to
Yeah.
let. We have one big fallback. I mean, one thing that holds us back, and I can't criticize this because it's democracy. The difference is the Russians have 50-year plans. The Chinese have 100-year plans.
Right.
Plans are never interrupted. They may be tweaked Like the Chinese, hey, we can do more damage economically than we can militarily. So let's start buying every country in the world that has resources and all this kind of stuff. So
Yeah.
it is it's out there and it's for real. You know, they're formidable enemies meant on undermining us, and we're the only country primarily standing in their way. We have some great allies, don't get me wrong. I've
Hmm.
worked with the Brits, I've worked with the Aussies, the Poles, the Thais. There's a lot of people out there that have been loyal, liaison partners. But at the end of the day, it's the U.S. that ends up leading all these counter misery efforts. So,
Right. And to me, taking away from what you said, the two biggest things you talked about the difference between like Carter and Reagan, and that can be summarized in a simple statement of strength is deterrence. And when you have somebody who exudes strength, right? And we had another guest on here who talked about how when Trump sat down, he had literally sat down and had a dinner with other world leaders. He executed a missile strike on an Iranian general, Soleimani, right, and took him out and said, "This is what I could do to you." And it's that sort of strength that you're exuding when you do something like that. You make a statement that causes deterrence, right? And then you bring up about the things that the Chinese do to undermine the United States and its efforts around the world. And the thing is that the difference between us and them is they see those economic avenues as just as much as of warfare as putting boots on the ground. It's an asymmetric style, and they have been at war with us in that way for a very long time. And the United States does just for some reason doesn't recognize it that way. It's taken such a long time for us to realize that they see that as a type of warfare. There is an economic battleground, and that's how they see it.
absolutely, absolutely. They're buying the way into the demise of this country, and
Completely.
economically, and again, the fentanyl again. A lot of that comes from China. You think that they're
Hmm.
not letting that stuff go out because they know where it's going?
Yeah,
Yeah, without,
teaching them how to
but
make it.
there's something that I've read, and it's actually in Latin, but my Latin sucks. But it says, if you want peace, prepare for war.
Prepare for war.
And
Yeah.
I teach this all the time when I'm teaching, military tactics or anything that goes along that line. Is the basic thing is what usually doesn't happen is what you prepare for.
Hmm.
Mhm.
If you're prepared, usually that ain't gonna happen. Something else that you didn't prepare for may, but I'm a firm believer in that, and that goes into again the macro to where you have leadership that says, look, I want to negotiate, but they got to sit across that table, and you got to look like you can bite back
Yeah.
because Putin is not a socialite, and in Chinese leadership, and the Iranians and North Korea, they will do anything to destroy us,
Hmm.
anything that they're capable. But if they look at you and they go, yeah, this guy I don't want to mess with.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Strength is deterrence.
Yep.
Yep. It kind of goes back to the saying where I'd rather be a warrior in a garden than a gardener
Going
in
into
a
war.
war. Yeah, because you're not going to go far. Um,
Japanese.
yeah. You talked about the CIA needs to keep like politics out and can't be political, and the military needs to do that as well. Um, well, politics kind of got in the way. There was like those two executive orders from presidents that kind of made to where you couldn't assassinate certain people or anything like that. And you in the book you talked about how one of your I can't remember his name exactly, but he ran into Osama bin Laden like while on a run and a whole bunch of other stuff, but he couldn't do anything about it. Is that kind of what you're leading at when the politics should stay out of it because had they maybe captured or taken out Osama bin Laden at that time, obviously history would have been completely changed. We have no idea today. But is that kind of what you're alluding to?
Without a doubt. Look, the guy that you're referring to is Billy Wall. Billy Wall was a legendary Green Beret, came to the agency, did a lot of surveillance for us. And he was our chief of surveillance in Khartoum when Osama bin Laden was there. He's
Mhm.
the one that saw and identified and photographed the Jackal, Carlos the Jackal. So, an incredible individual. So here you have a guy who was legendary back VSOG legendary guy in Vietnam. He knows special forces. He is the Green Beret poster child. And he's telling you, we can get this guy. You know how many times we try to fly that up the flag? Dozens of times.
Countless.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm a plank owner of the Bin Laden Task Force. Mike Shorey was the chief. I
Right.
was the deputy of the station. And for us, we tried to get bin Laden in Khartoum. We had all of the kind of intelligence, the millions of dollars that he was pouring into terrorist camps, his plans, how his network was growing. We used to call him the Godfather because he could reach out to other organizations and recruit them to work, the enemy of my enemy kind of crap.
Hmm.
And one day, like I said, Billy and I were very good friends, and a couple of times we'd be sitting there as you go. The topic would always come up. He says, "Rex, I could have killed him with a pencil. I could have killed him with a rock." And if you look at, let's say that, okay, I don't have a problem putting a bullet in somebody's head if they, just imagine if somebody could have put a bullet in Hitler's head in 1937. Okay,
Right.
so 9 millimeter, 27 cents back then, and not millions of lives lost there.
Right.
But if
Yeah.
we had neutralized bin Laden, could have been a compromise, could have been a duct tape operation and render his ass out, take him into interrogation, blah, blah, blah. The coal wouldn't have happened.
Hmm.
Chances are that the bombing of our two embassies in Africa wouldn't have happened.
Hmm.
And you continue to take that over all the way to 9/11. So we do this time and time again where the politics, and in this case, that the administration kept saying, well, we don't have enough proof that he's really evil. We have hundreds of reports from different sources from overhead, filming the camps that he's building, that he is building an army. He is building a very radical military capability to target us. And you have a chance to take this guy out of the equation. That
Yeah.
blood is in our hands.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Even from like a civilian law enforcement perspective, you can pull somebody in for less just to ask them questions,
Yep.
Just why this person, the level of nefarious planning and carrying out actions that he did to not just attempt to stop and carry out what you're talking about, it just kind of to me is like the definition of insanity.
Yeah.
Yeah,
It
absolutely.
blows my mind that you said there that like, well, he's not evil enough. Like, well, how evil did he need to be
Right.
for you to finally like do something? Well, I guess he had to be evil enough to cause 9/11 for you to finally start doing something. And President Clinton has said in speeches and in like interviews that one of his like greatest regrets while president was not authorizing or pulling the trigger to take out Osama bin Laden, because he had several times where he had the opportunity and the ability to just say, yeah, go for it, and he never did. And it's he was worried about his ratings, and he was worried about a bunch of other stuff, and he didn't think that it was going to get to that point, and worried about his post-presidential political career, and that makes sense because you talked in your book about how you had people in the CIA who are worried, they don't want to say anything or do anything because they're worried about their pension or their paycheck, and then you had the actual like the dogs in there doing the work, kind of like what you fell into, who were like, screw this, I'm doing it for America. But yeah, it was something that he spoke about regretting, is not doing it when he could.
Yeah, and you're talking about the morality of things.
Hmm.
9/11, we went after the Taliban and Al Qaeda, but that's retaliation.
Yeah.
The,
Right.
the mission of the Counter-Terrorism Center is to preempt and disrupt, not to do. We'll do vengeance on anybody. That's hell. That's the easiest part.
Right.
Hmm.
But having the fortitude to preempt and disrupt something before it happens, that's the money deal there. That's what you want to do.
Yeah.
And we keep we keep missing those opportunities over and over and over again.
Yeah. Well, we haven't had a large enough attack like 9/11 since it. And you were still in the CIA until 2004, so you were there, a couple of years after 9/11. Is there anything that maybe you could tell us, if you're allowed to, or anything that has a CIA stopped potential other 9/11s since then? Like, is there things the American public, because the CIA is very secretive. Do you think the U.S. populace would be more in tune with the CIA if they could come out and be like, hey, we stopped like 15 more 9/11s, or we stopped like 20 more. I don't know if there's an exact number, but obviously they've had to have stopped at least another one since then. But is there ones you can maybe contribute or talk about, or the idea of it?
That I have the issue that I have that is if it's not in the book, I can't talk about it because anything that I say has to be pre-approved by the agency. But in
For sure.
Yeah,
generalities,
of
I
course.
can guarantee you that we have disrupted dozens of plans and intentions that were evil against us here on our soil and overseas. And it isn't just CIA, okay? We're
Yeah.
talking DEA, we're talking even the FBI, with all the black eyes that they've gotten of late, that again, that's politics. The
Hmm.
guys and gals that are out there doing God's work, they're doing God's work like our law enforcement folks are. So yeah, the morality is that we let these things happen and then blame everybody else. But the bottom line is when one is in front of you and you could have actually, justified changing history, and you didn't. And that to me is something that unfortunately, I don't think those kind of people worry about those kind of sins. But that's bad karma.
Hmm.
100%. Well, honestly, Rick, it has been a serious pleasure talking to you and listening to what you have to say. And there's been times in this conversation where I genuinely have just kind of been in awe in some of the things that you've gone through in your life, and you're willing to put it in a book for people like me and Zach and others to read. But this has been one of my favorite conversations I've ever had with somebody, and just listening to what they have to say. So I genuinely appreciate it. And I know Zach does too. You coming on and talking to just two regular guys, and having this conversation with us, it means a lot, truly.
No, thank you. You're helping me, and you guys have served, and you continue to serve because what you're doing is a service right now. You're getting this
Appreciate that.
word out to I don't know how many people, but people that are going to say, "Oh, wow, I hadn't thought of that," or "Gee, that's a different angle."
Yeah,
Sure.
We all continue to serve the way that and for me, let's face it, the book is my last firefight. I ain't doing anything but ride horses and motorcycles after this, but
sounds
because
nice.
it'll work,
Yeah,
especially the promo part. But yeah, it's very rewarding to be able to look back and know that you didn't change the world, but you made a difference. You know.
100%.
For sure. Well, we really appreciate you being here. Like Brandon said, we really enjoyed talking with you. You said earlier that you were in the shadows of other giants and stuff. But I think that you are a giant for other people, for future generations. Your book puts people in your shadow. So you said that you appreciate being called a hero, and we do want to let you know that you are a hero to a lot of Americans and to a lot of people, especially after reading this book. You're just the
Absolutely.
next giant for us to be in the shadow of, and hopefully we can then, or anyone listening could then be the next generation of giants to then put the next generation of Americans in shadows as well. So thank you very much, Rick, for being here. We really appreciated everything. And to
Can't
everyone
recommend this
listening,
book enough, honestly.
yes, read his book. It was great. Or listen to it when you're driving 6 hours for work. It was an amazing listen. It was an amazing read. We appreciate everyone who's listening. Please make sure you like, comment, and subscribe. It really helps us out. And we look forward to future podcasts with future great guests.
All right, guys. Thank you for having me.
Thank you.